Let's get straight to addressing some of those concerns. We're joined now by Dr. Heather Yo, SurvivorNet medical advisor and associate professor of surgery and population health sciences at Weill Cornell Medical College. Doctor, okay, so there's this pause that's being recommended because of these blood clot concerns. I was seeing a great tweet a little bit earlier, however, that called the move irresponsible and said that 6 clots out of 7 million is incredibly low, and in fact lower than the risk that some folks might face when taking birth control, for example. So what then do you make of this move? Is it irresponsible or is it well-founded?
I mean, I think that the concern is that with a lot of the stigma leading into the vaccines and the concern from many people, even though we went through the standard FDA process, the concern that things may have been rushed, my guess is that the reason that the CDC put this pause is they want to let people know that they're taking these concerns seriously. But as you point out, this is a very small, 6 in over 6.8 million doses. And actually the incidence of this problem happening for unknown reasons is probably 10 to 15 per million people. So we don't know necessarily that there's an association. I think that the concern is that COVID itself has had some issues with coagulation and inflammatory response. There's concern that this could be due to the inflammatory response. So I think that it makes sense to put a pause and to let the public know, that we are taking any side effects seriously.
Doctor, earlier today, we actually heard former President Trump weigh in on what's happening with J&J. In a statement, he said the Biden administration has done a terrible disservice in pausing this vaccine. And he said the results of this vaccine have been extraordinary. He says, and now its reputation will be permanently challenged. What does happen when they resume giving these J&J shots out? How do you convince the public, or how will they have to convince the public that they are safe to take?
I mean, I think that the reason that you do a pause is so that you can actually examine the scientific evidence. And I think that the concern for patients is that all of these vaccines, they were not rushed. They went through the standard process. But I think that the concern is making sure that we're tracking more long-term effects and some of these other more unusual effects.
What do you mean when you say that?
I don't think it's going to mean long-term detriment for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I mean, if we can actually make sure that these are small, rare events that aren't associated, then I think it may actually give the public more confidence.
So I hear what you're saying, that they weren't rushed, that they went through the standard process. But I mean, from the time that we had this pandemic start to the time that we did get a vaccine to market is much faster than we typically see for a lot of diseases. I mean, let's just ask the question, is there at all any possibility that because these vaccines were developed so quickly in response to the pandemic, that perhaps there is a greater risk than we know about right now?
I mean, I don't think mRNA vaccines, for example, and viral vector vaccines, mRNA vaccines are newer, but the mRNA technique and technology is not newer. Viral vaccines have been used for decades. So none of these technologies or techniques is new. It's really the specific vaccines that are newer to market. So I think we do understand some of these longer term side effects. I think that there's been a concern about public perception for a long time, and I think that's why it's important that we're very open with the data, that we're making sure that we talk to the public about any concerns and that we analyze the scientific data in as open a way as we can be. And I think that's what the Biden administration has been trying to do.
Can you put in perspective for us, though, Doctor, how rare is it that a vaccine risk would be blood clotting? And also for the millions of people who are going out there getting vaccinated, regardless of which one they're getting, what are some signs they should look for if they are having issues with blood clots?
I mean, in the general population, there's a risk of blood clots. For example, this particular group that's been noted has been in women under the age of 50. So I think they said 18 to 48 for these 6 patients. I think that it would be good for us to understand some of their risk factors. For example, this particular side effect or cerebral venous sinus thrombosis happens most commonly in women in that age group, most of whom have been found to have some hormonal exposure, so oral contraceptives, or something else that puts them at risk. So I think going back and understanding of these patients who had the vaccine, who had additional risks, may help us to assess what the risk of the actual vaccine is and contributing to that.
All right, Dr. Heather Yeo, SurvivorNet Medical Advisor, Associate Professor of Surgery and Population Health Sciences at Weill Cornell Medical College. Thanks so much for bringing us all of those insights.